Part 2. The Psychology of Reasoning. Psychology does not attempt to solve the problem of just what mind is. Instead, it contents itself with regarding mind as experiencing a series of mental states, and of discovering and announcing just how the mental processes arise, proceed, and manifest themselves. In this way, psychology inquires into the mental processes involved in the activities of reasoning, and reports just what laws, principles, and methods of procedure it has discovered to be active in that important field of mentation. In the first place, it discovers and reports that reasoning is a phase or form of thinking, that phase or form which is concerned with considering, deliberating, forming opinions, judging, concluding and ascertaining valid grounds for belief in anything. It discovers and reports that thinking employs thoughts as its material, these thoughts being combined, woven and manufactured into the complex products of reasoning. Perception and percepts thoughts are varying degrees of complexity, ranging from the simplest perception to the most complex general idea. The simplest form of thought is that known as the percept, or the simple idea derived from perception. But even the simplest percept is really complex, and composed of several elements, as you shall see presently. Perception is not the simplest and most elementary mental process. Below it in the scale is what is known as sensation. Sensation, however, is not usually included in the category of thought. On the contrary, it is considered to be the raw material of thought. It is worthwhile to pause here a moment in order to note the distinction between sensation and perception. Sensation is the mental state arising from the excitation of portions of the nervous system by reason of their contact with objects or forces external to the nervous system. Perception is the mental state arising from 1. The conscious recognition of the sensory reports, 2. The interpretation of these reports as particular kinds of sensation, and 3. The association of these reports with the external object or force originally giving rise to them. Example: there is placed before you a certain external object, the object known to most persons as an orange. Your mental processes concerning it are as follows. Your sense of sight reports certain conditions arising from an excitation of the optical nerves. Your sense of touch reports certain conditions arising from the contact of the nerves of your fingertips with something external to it. Your sense of smell reports certain conditions arising from the contact of your nervy hands located in the mucous membrane of your nostrils with certain subtle emanations of the substance of something external to them. Your sense of taste reports certain conditions arising from the contact of the nerves located in your mouth and tongue with an outside substance which has been placed within the mouth, or upon the extended tongue. Your sense of hearing makes no report in this particular case. Your perception then proceeds to recognize and interpret these sensations. In doing so, it is aided by your past experience with sensation, by means of which you have evolved from the simply sensation stage of the young infant to the perceptive stage of the adult of at least average experience with external things. Your perception also proceeds to associate these sensations with things external to itself. It recognizes and interprets these sensory reports in terms of perception of size, shape, form, distance, color, etc. In terms of perception of weight, size, shape, form, degree of hardness, etc. In terms of perception of odor, fragrance, aroma, etc. In terms of sweetness and agreeable taste, etc. To all of these sensory reports it applies certain terms which it has adopted as representing certain perceived sensations. It recognizes the perceptive elements of roundness, certain size, certain shape, certain form characteristics, yellowish color of certain weight and certain feel of fragrance and aroma of sweetness and pleasant taste. It interprets these perceptive elements in symbolic forms of thought and speech called words, or terms. It associates these perceptive elements or characteristics with the external object which has given rise to the several sensorious stimuli in question. You may object that you perceive instinctively, and that you never perform consciously the processes just described. But we would remind you that while sensation is instinctive, perception is acquired through experience, and becomes instinctive only by reason of repeated practice and cultivation of the habit. The young infant senses, but does not perceive. It learns only by experience to distinguish between its various sensations, to recognize them as such, to interpret them, to associate them with external objects. It feels from the start, but it must learn by gradual experience to recognize, interpret, and associate with external objects. such feelings and sensations. Sully gives us a simple, effective figurative illustration of the difference between sensations and perceptions. He says, sensations are the alphabet by which we spell out the objects presented to us. In order to grasp and apprehend these objects, these letters must be put together after the manner of words. Thus the apprehension of an apple by the eye involves the putting together of various sensations of sight, touch and taste. This is the mind's work, and is known as perception. He further tells us that by these sensational letters we may spell out, and make up perceptive words. For instance, from the several sensational letters of O, R, A, N, G, E, we may spell out and make up the perceptive word orange. Gordy also gives us a practical explanation, as follows. What does the mind do with its sensations of colors, odors and tastes in order to perceive colors, odors and tastes as qualities of objects? It groups them together, does it not? When you look at an apple, you group its color, taste, and smell together as qualities of one object. You perceive only when they seem to be qualities actually forming a part of the objects in the world about us, or states of our own bodies. Strictly speaking, what we do when we perceive is to make a group consisting of one or more sensations, and ideas of sensations, and to regard the group as qualities of an external object. A percept is a thought in which one or more sensory elements are recognized, interpreted, and associated with an external object are regarded as being qualities of that object and are incorporated into a group, giving the impression of a single and unitary whole, which is regarded as constituting the idea and meaning of that object. Illustration: when we perceive an external object, e.g., an orange, we experience a group or aggregate of sensory impressions which by recognition, interpretation and association we combine into the unitary, single thought of that orange. Not an orange, or any orange, however, but merely and strictly that particular orange, the and any being an element of another class of thoughts. Conception and concepts. The form or phase of thought which is immediately above the percept in the scale of reasoning is known as the concept, or the complex idea derived from conception. The concept is constituted, composed, and made up of several percepts. Just as the percept represents the thought of the composite qualities of a particular object, so does the concept represent the thought of the composite essential and common qualities of a certain class of objects. Thus, we have found that the percept of that orange is a composite of the qualities of that particular orange. Now we find that the concept of orange, meaning any and every orange, all oranges, is a composite of the qualities which are possessed in common by all oranges, and which each and every orange must possess in order to be an orange at all the essential qualities of oranges in general, all the qualities which must be stated in a complete definition of the general term, orange. Conception is the mental act of combining perceptive ideas into a more general group, the idea of a general class of objects. By it is formed the concept, or the thought or idea representing the whole number of objects denoted by the several general perceptive ideas composing it. To understand the process of conception more clearly, you must first understand the essential nature and character of the concept which is formed by the act of conception. We ask you to give careful attention to the following consideration of the concept, for you must understand this thoroughly if you wish to manifest efficient reasoning power along the lines of practical logic. The dictionary definition of concept is an abstract general conception, a general notion, a universal idea, the idea or a larger or smaller class of particular things. In traditional logic, the concept is the idea of a characteristic or characteristics belonging to more than one person or thing, and, thus, to a general class of things it stands opposed to the percept, which is an idea dealing with particular things only. The act of conception consists of several stages or phases, which are always performed with greater or less precision and accuracy by the person thinking, although he may not be conscious of their nature or of the order observed in their manifestation. Having acquired only gradually the art of performing this process, having obtained it along the lines of the evolution and development of his mental activity from early childhood, and having taken on the habit of performing it, he employs it more or less unconsciously, and he takes it for granted. Analysis, however, will show that these stages or phases are necessary, and that they are always performed consciously or unconsciously by the thinking individual. The processes above referred to are as follows: 1. perception of numerous particular objects. 2. Comparison of these particular objects, and noting wherein they agree or differ in their qualities. 3. Selection of certain individual objects which are found to agree in definite fundamental qualities to be similar or like in certain respects. 4. Generalizing, or classifying these similar or like objects into classes, which classes have as their essential and necessary qualities those characteristics which have been discovered to be common to and universal among those selected individual objects. 5. Denominating or giving a name or applying a term to the general class of objects, putting a verbal tag or label on it to distinguish it as a whole. Thus the general class of fruit known as the orange, or oranges, includes all the fruit of that general kind, and its classic qualities are those which are essential and necessary to all oranges, and which are common and universal among all oranges, though the numerous particular oranges may differ materially in non-essential characteristics. The thought, idea, or notion of the orange, or oranges, as a class, is the concept orange, to which that general term is applied. Into that class must fit, and under that name or term must fall, each and every one, any and all, of the fruit known as oranges. Gordy says, conception is that act of mind by which it forms an idea of a class, or that act of mind that enables us to use general names intelligently. We never see a class, i.e., an indefinite number of individuals that resemble each other in certain particulars. Classes did not make themselves known to us through any of the senses. How then does the mind form an idea of a class? To answer that question is to state what the mind does in conception. Smaller concepts may be combined into larger ones, by the application of the characteristic principles of conception, viz. 1. Cognition of several particular concepts. 2. Comparison of one particular concept with another or others, for the purpose of noting resemblances and differences. 3. Selection of certain particular concepts which are found to agree or resemble each other in one or more particulars. 4. Generalizing or classifying these like concepts into larger concepts. 5. Affixing names and terms to these larger concepts. The process of conception may be continued at great length, higher and still higher generalizations being made. The end comes only when you have generalized every existing object into one supreme and universal class, the summum genus, comprising either all existing things regarded as a whole, or the ultimate essence or substance of such. To this ultimate concept is given the class term or name, being, the sole essential and necessary quality of which is existence in some form, phase, mode or degree of being, and as a something or somewhat of which the only essential quality is that it exists. Besides the quantitative distinction between different kinds of concepts, i.e., the difference consisting of the number of objects included in their content, there is to be noted a qualitative distinction, i.e., a difference in general kind, character, or quality. The several most important kinds of qualitative differences between concepts are based upon the following lines of distinction. 1. Material quality. 2. Incidental quality. 3. Causal quality. Each of these are considered below in further detail. The material quality of a concept is determined by the fundamental material character of the objects represented in the general idea, considered apart from their incidental relations or associations with other things. Example: the concept sheep is formed and composed of the essential and necessary fundamental qualities common to and universally present in the entire number of particular objects called sheep. This apart from any use or employment of sheep, or any part or portion of their bodies, their energy, etc. In the same way, following the same rule of qualitative unity of character, the concept sheep may become a part, element, or factor in the larger concept called ruminants. Likewise, the latter concept may be included in the still larger one of mammals, and this, in turn, into a still greater one called animals, and so on, until the ultimate concept of being is reached. The incidental quality of a concept is determined not by the fundamental material character of the objects represented in the general idea, but rather by their incidental relations or associations with other things, certain subordinate or secondary qualities. The most important incidental qualities of this kind are those concerned with utility, use, employment, and practical application to certain purposes or ends. Example: things, and their percepts, may be classified under the category of the quality of being useful for fuel purposes, of being useful as light, of producing agents, of employment as disinfectants, of use as medicinal remedies, as use for tanning purposes, curing purposes, preserving purposes, pickling purposes, or use, employment, utility, or possible application for any purpose whatsoever. Under this mode of conceptual classification, coal, wood, oil, fats, etc., may be included in the concept of fuel, i.e., things serving for heat-producing purposes. In the same way, torches, oil, candles, electrical lamps, etc., may be included in the concept of light-producing things. Such examples might be extended indefinitely, but the above will serve to illustrate the characteristic element of this form of classification of concepts. The causal quality of a concept is determined neither by the fundamental material character, nor by the incidental relations or associations, of the objects represented in the general idea, but rather by the power of such objects to produce causal results or effects by reason of their presence and actions. The causal quality of a particular thing is represented by the idea of how does it work, what it will do, what results or effects proceed from its presence and action. The causal qualities of a number of things, when found to agree in general causal character, result in their being combined and included in a concept of a law. Such a law is merely the concept embodying the general idea of how and in what way this class of things works. A still higher causal synthesis, or generalization, results in the concept of a principle, or law of laws of action, a cause of causes. Raised to its highest power, this form of concept posits the existence of an ultimate principle of cause, a causeless cause. The general processes of reasoning psychology also furnishes us with a comprehensive classification of the several general processes involving in logical reasoning. This classification proceeds as follows: judgment upon the materials of thought, resulting from the following processes, viz. 1. Analysis or the discovery of differences in character. 2. Synthesis, or the discovery of resemblances in character. 3. Inference, or the induction or deduction of new facts or truths from others previously discovered by analysis or synthesis. The following brief statements will serve to explain in greater detail the nature and meaning of the above mentioned several processes involved in logical reasoning. Judgment is that mental process involving comparison and discrimination, i.e., discernment of resemblances and differences in the qualities of respective percepts or concepts, whereby the mind forms opinions and decisions concerning the nature of things under consideration. In the processes of judgment, the mind compares its perceptive or conceptive thoughts, ideas, or notions, and then reaches a decision concerning a. their degree of resemblance or difference, b. their respective relations of the whole and its parts, or of the parts and their whole, 3. their respective relations of cause and effect, or effect and cause, or 4. their respective incidental relations. Judgments, when completed, are always affirmative or negative. The mind cannot reason or think logically without judging. To think or reason logically is to judge. From its simplest and most elemental stages and phases, to its most complex and derivative forms and modes, reasoning is found to employ the processes of judgment. It cannot proceed without them. Analysis is that mental process whereby differences between the qualities, properties and attributes, the respective characters of two or more objects of perception or conception, are detected and discovered as a consequence of analysis. Particular percepts or concepts are mentally analyzed, dissected, separated, refined, or resolved into their constituent parts, elements, or factors, each of which is represented by a simpler mental idea and its appropriate term. Synthesis is that mental process whereby resemblances in the qualities, properties and attributes, the respective characters of two or more objects of perception or conception, are detected and discovered. As a consequence of synthesis, particular percepts and concepts are mentally synthesized, joined, combined, associated, related, put together, united and fused into a concept of a higher order, a greater class, a more general and more nearly universal character, into a greater whole, law, or principle. Inference is that mental process whereby, through analogy, induction, or deduction, new facts or truths are adduced or drawn from others previously discovered by the processes of analysis or synthesis, or by both of these combined. It has been defined as deduction or induction from preceding known facts or premises, resulting in the discovery of new facts and truths. Again, it has been stated as the process of coordinating and systematizing previously acquired knowledge, so that new knowledge is thereby gained through induction or deduction, or similar process. Inference is the process of reasoning from the known to the unknown or the discovery of a third fact from two facts already known. It produces a new and third judgment based upon two prior judgments which have been arrived at through some previous reasoning of some kind. Its forms are known, respectively, as logical analogy, logical induction, and logical deduction. Note: you are requested to familiarize yourself with the above stated explanations of analysis, synthesis, inference, and judgment, as well as of the previously stated explanations of precepts and concepts. A thorough understanding of these elements of logical reasoning, or reasoning thought, is essential for your comprehension of the further instruction to be presented in the following sections of this book. The fundamental building and materials of thought, i.e., percepts and concepts, and the basic processes whereby such materials are put together and built into the structure of thought. These must be understood by those who desire to engage in the working of thought building, logical reasoning, or rational thought. The 7 axioms of logical reasoning. In logical reasoning, you are asked to apply the principles of several fundamental and basic axioms. An axiom is a self-evident and necessary truth, a proposition which it is necessary to take for granted, an established principle. These axioms of logical reasoning, however, while offered as self-evident and necessary to be taken for granted, are not the arbitrary dogmas or dicta of real or pretended authority. Instead, they represent the universal experience of human thought rationally applied and directed. They represent truths of which the contrary is unthinkable, and which would constitute a scandal of rational thought. These axioms are in constant use, in the thought processes of reasoning human beings. They are taken for granted, and are either directly asserted or tacitly implied in all logical reasoning. The 7 axioms of logical reasoning, which we shall consider in detail in the succeeding sections of this book, are named, and briefly stated, in the following paragraphs, as follows. The axiom of logical analysis: everything is composed, constituted and made up of a. parts, elements and factors, and b. qualities, properties and attributes, which in combination, arrangement, correlation and coordination constitute its character and make it just what it is, and into which it may be analyzed, dissected and separated in thought. 2. The axiom of logical synthesis: everything belongs to a class of things possessing one or more common and essential characteristics. Many things belong to several classes of different, though not opposing, character. 3. The axiom of logical judgment: all logical judgment is based upon these 3 fundamental laws of thought, viz. 1. A thing is always just what it is, and nothing else, at a given time and place, no matter what particular name or term may be employed to indicate, designate or represent it. 2. A thing cannot both be and not be just what it is affirmed to be, at the same time and place. 3. A thing must either be, or not be, that which it is affirmed to be, at a given time and place. There is no third alternative. 4. The axiom of logical analogy: a few things which are alike in many respects, are probably, though not certainly, alike in some other respects. V. The axiom of logical induction: what is discovered to be true of a great number of observed objects, things, or individuals of a definite general class, is practically certain to be true of that general class as a whole. The characteristics assumed to be possessed in common by all the individual objects or things in a definite general class, constitute the accepted essential characteristics of that class as a whole. By the axiom of logical causation: every change, happening, event, or entrance into or exit from existence, proceeds from precedent conditions or causes given the same causative factors, the same material elements, and the same environmental conditions. The same results and effects will follow in all cases so determined and conditioned. 7. The axiom of logical deduction: what is true of the class as a whole must be true of each, every, and all of the individuals composing that class. Note: You are advised to commit to memory the above stated 7 axioms of logical reasoning. A consistent and intelligent application of their respective principles will open to you many doors of the temple of logical thought.